Okay, so now we are in week 10, session 2 tutorial. Right, so we have already completed. Now let me go through the. Right, so we have done theory questions already last session, and then case study one. So we are actually in the middle of this case study, right? We need to develop activity diagram for scenario. There were two scenarios, right? So one here is for the contractor sales, and the second scenario is the general public sale, right? Or so in-store sale, in other words. Right, so they just ask us to do the following for these two scenarios. So we read this case study. It's like a kind of a Bunnings kind of a warehouse sort of thing. They have contractors who coming and purchasing some materials, and then general public they come and purchase some materials. So their purchasing activities are quite different to each other. So that is what it actually tries to tell. So they ask us to develop use case descriptions and activity diagrams and system sequence diagrams for these scenarios, right? So we already developed activity diagram for contractor, as well as fully developed use case fully developed use case description for the contractor as well, right? So now, so if I share my screen, so we have, this is what we have developed as an activity diagram for the contractor. So 3 swim lanes. So basically contractor comes to the clerk, and clerk is interacting with the system to enter the information, and finally processing the payment, right? And then we reflected that in our use case description like this, right? So you need to, now when you write the use case description, make sure that you just format it. Right now here I haven't formatted, but just try to do that. Okay, right, so we done these two, and then the next step is we need to develop a system sequence diagram to reflect this flow. So basically, system sequence diagram, we are trying to show the interaction between or the communication basically between the system and the actor. Actor in this case is the clerk, right? So basically, when we develop the application, so we need to invoke something from the system. We press the button, we take some action, we input the, and then press the button, etc., etc. So that's a kind of a communication, yeah. Right. So actually, most of the stuff reflected in here. So when you go through your activity diagram to reflect use case flow of activities, it's easily we can actually see what kind of interactions or communication goes through with these two actors, because each time the boundary crosses, we can assume some form of communication back and forth going on. So that's what we need to capture in a system sequence diagram. Okay, so let me actually see first whether we can um, develop that using diagrams.net software online portal. So let me check that first. I think there is some notations that we can use. Yeah, let me take this out. So if we go to UML now, let's say here, right now system sequence diagram, you know how to now let me actually show you well first how it looks like. I think week number, we did it in week 9. So let me go to the lecture. Right, just have a very quick look how it looks like. Yeah, so this is how the system sequence diagram look like, right? So we have actor, and then the system we're showing using this box, right? So this is the what do you call, lifeline of the I would say this is a lifeline of the use case, right? So until the use case ends, there is an interactions going on, and then it like we are invoking the shipping clerk here in this case. Just zoom a little bit. Oops, what happened? Let me just step back. Sorry, guys. So let me take this one. So it like the customer invoking something or communicating to create a new customer account in the system by supplying these three pieces of information, right? So it's like we are activating a kind of a function, right? Or clicking something and it activates something which we need name, phone, and email addresses. So that's how we write it in kind of a function, kind of a procedure, kind of name. So we are passing the parameters, right? Or maybe this means that we are typing a form details in a form, and then click enter, and it goes to the system, right? And then the system displays back the details that we have entered. So in this case, now see, when the information comes back, we show in a dash arrow pointing towards to the actors or customer side, and here we are sending information, so arrow pointing towards the system, right? So this is a one way we can show, and then this is the second way we can show. Rather than having two lines back and forth, we can use the message notation. Now in the message notation, we shows the both of these interaction or information in and information out in the same message flow, right? So here is the input to the system, right? Entering address details goes in, and then this is the assignment operator, and then the left hand side is where we are getting information back from the system. So address details probably displays here, right? That's what it means. And if you have more than one address, we can put because address means it can be have home address, office address, etc., etc. So we can put some asterisk if you have more than one. Right, so this is what we actually wanted to develop for our case by going this activity diagram. So we need to see whether we have these symbols in here, right? So you can use that probably. Yeah, so let me check. Yep, so we have the lifeline for the object, right? Okay, this is the object lifeline, or we can say this is system. So just we'll name it as a system, and then more, and then we need to have another lifeline for the actor. So let's see whether we have that. Should be there somewhere. Where is that? Just give me a sec. I'll have a look. Yeah, okay. So we have here. Okay, where's here? Right. So in this case, the actor is so in our case the actor is the sales clerk or the clerk, right? So we need to name that. Maybe we can say the textbook, small textbook. We can say sales clerk. Right. And now we need to actually see how the system, I mean, the message flows. Right. So the first thing is right, the customer, so the clerk, sorry, enters the information to here the system, and the system actually validate the contract details, right? When the when the customer enters something to the system. So sorry, clerk enters the ID number or the name of the contractor, then the system validate it. So that is what we need to capture first, right? That's the first communication. So what we can do here is let's go back, and then that information goes from here to there, right? So we can capture that. Let's see whether we have a, yeah, okay, let me check appropriate, yeah, maybe we can say take this one, right? So that goes in. So we can say I can actually put a text box and saying validate the contractor, right? Or validate contractor, validate contractor, right? Validate contractor details or something like that. And then what we are inputting here, the sales clerk input the name or ID number of the contractor, right? Name or ID. Yeah. So that is what. Yeah. So that's the first interaction. Yeah. Right. So then the system is displaying the contract information probably, right? Back to, that's why this comes back, because there should be validated information displays back to the clerk, so then he can verify, he or she can verify. Yeah. So so let's capture that. So the information flows from the system to here. That's the response. Yeah. So response we need to show in the dash arrow. Do we have the dash arrow? Yeah. Yeah, this is the return. Maybe we can say take this one. Okay. Need to go in this one. Okay. So let us name that the contract information. Sorry, contract information. Yeah. Or maybe actually, yeah. So contractor. I just put contract info. Okay. Right. So that is the that's what we are getting back. And then what happened? The contractor, or the clerk is kind of creating a ticket or open the ticket. Open the ticket means probably from the system, maybe in that same window of same user interface, we may have something, a button called, okay, create a ticket for a contract, right? So that is what we mean by that. So we can actually show that in our system sequence diagram, like the information goes back to the system. Alright, so let me duplicate this and put it here, saying okay. So put the text box. So I can say create ticket. So So this is just a really a small function, yeah. So we are not passing any parameter, it's just clicking something. Okay, so create a ticket, and then what happened, we create the ticket, you can see here, then it will allow us to enter the details, right? So items, right? Contractors items. There is a loop. Now this is the loop, right? Um, so and then we enter it, and then the system displays some sort of descriptions back to the screen. Uh, maybe system, sorry, the information regarding the product, or description of the product and the price of the product, right? So we need to now show these two inside the loop. Right now, how to show the loop in system sequence diagram? So there is a way, maybe we can use this one. Yeah, this is called the loop frame. Okay. Okay, let's see whether we can. So something happened. Something happened. Can I? Yep. Okay. So to be very careful when you draw these diagrams, you need to have a very good mouse. My mouse. Okay. All right. So what we can do is we can just now. Can you see that kind of a small here name? So we can change this to. We can indicate. Okay, this is a loop, right? And inside this we need to show that that two types of information flows. So we are adding item, so Clark is adding item, and then the system displays the item information. Yeah, so we can duplicate this one of these arrows. So that is the first one, and let's duplicate this. Oops. And this is a second, so I just will change the name later on. Okay, now let's take the text box for the first one, just change the name. So let's put the name here. It's so add item, you can say add item to ticket, add the item to the ticket. And what we are actually passing here is so we need to tell what are the parameters. So basically item ID, right? So we may be selecting it from a drop down list, item ID and quantity, right? Quantity of the each item. So this is what we are telling the system. Okay, these are the two things I need to record. And then the system shows you the description and price of the product. Yeah, so I can say the price, comma, description. Price, comma, description. Yeah, so that is what going on this inside this loop. Okay. Maybe sometimes people make it a little bit bigger too, so therefore we can see it's clearly it's a loop. Right, so then what happens? Next one is right. So end of the sale, we don't need to actually show. It's maybe a button that in that particular this particular interface we can say okay, there is no any more item, right? So we just pressed it, and then here you can see the system calculating the total. Or maybe we can say okay, end of the sales and the total, we can put a kind of a the same same message, or we can use the message notation to show these two, right? So when you press the end of the sale, we're getting the total sales value back to the screen, right? So let's put these two into a same using a message notation rather than having two lines. So what I can do here, I can actually use let me check, duplicate this. Okay, all right, so text box. Okay, so I can see, okay, so assignment operator, the right hand side is the message, so that is end of sale. So I just pressing the end of sale, so that means I'm getting back the total sales value, right? So rather than having two lines, I just show it in the same line using a message notation, right? And then what happened, what is there, probably now here then we check the credits, right? Then the system is asking what is the payment method, or maybe it says actually whether the credit is okay for that particular customer, right, or the contractor. And if the contractor pays by the cash need to be accepted, and then the system, once it has happened, we need to update the account. Actually, we can show this in a one message. We can say okay, and then it says okay, when the system updates the account, then it asks whether to print the receipt. Okay. So let's assume that in this function, end of sale function that we just mentioned here, contains this sort of credit and kind of checking, right? So let's assume like that, because otherwise it will getting complicated. Because we can ask developers, okay, when you develop the module for end of sale, that module please include this checking as well, right? So we can avoid the my small functions. Okay, so we can include that there. So we can actually go back straight away to print the receipt function a message, rather than having another checking kind of thing. Okay, so let me make it that. So let me have another message line. So here we want to print the receipt, right? So we can have a message saying okay, print receipt. So this is the function, but now can you see that it is optional, right? So here I'm putting the kind of a question mark saying okay, does this contractor want the receipt, yes or no, right? So it's optional. So how to show the optional print receipt? So what we can do is we can show the optional print receipt, just putting a square bracket. So there's a square. Okay, it's like square bracket, and then say inside the square bracket we say okay, receipt, right? So this says what this says is this message is optional, right? And then the receipt comes back to the sales clerk, and then the sales clerk hand over it, right? So we don't need to show that. So I just duplicate this, right? So this is the receipt. Oops. Receipt coming back. Right, so this is the receipt. So receipt comes back. Yeah, print the receipt, it is come back. Okay, so that's it actually. That's actually end the process. Okay. So this is the final version of system sequence diagram. So this we can say here. This is the system sequence diagram or SSD for the contractor. Or just let's see like a system sequence diagram. Right. So what we can do is now I just copy, take a snapshot, copy, and go back to my solution, and then maybe I can paste it here. So I have now activity diagram. I have the complete use case description for that use case, and then I have a system sequence diagram which shows which functions that I need to develop in the system that I can implement this use case. Right? Make sense, guys? Does it make sense? This question, this part? Yep. These three models, how it work hand in hand, right? See, there is a kind of a link, yeah. So you need to be very careful, right? So that is the contractor sales. So now we need to go to the public sales. Public sales. So I think you can develop the public sales activity diagram, use case, and so try to develop this one for the general public, okay? And then the system sequence diagram. So rather than I'm spending time here, so I'll go to the case study number 2. Are you okay with that? Can you do the can you attempt the public sales like what I have done here, right? Yes or no? Can you just let me know, because we are running out of 5 minutes. I don't want to spend too much of time in the same question. So can you, Spencer, Michaela, Darcy, Chingsen, Precious, Quang, what do you think? Are you okay with that if I jump to the question 2, case study 2? Yeah. Okay. So let's do the question 2, case study 2, and then if we have time, let's come. Okay. Right. So let's read this one. After reading the following narrative and going through the domain model, now this time they have given the domain model class diagram. Okay. Domain model class diagram at the end of the case study. Do the following. What do you mean by the domain model class diagram? Domain model means it's like a ERD, right? In the object-oriented systems, we use a class diagram, classes. Yeah. So let's go through that class diagram and try to understand once we read this case study, right? So what they ask us to do, they ask us to, the first part a list of use cases and use case diagram. Now this time they ask us to develop a use case diagram, not the use case description. Okay, so part B, they ask us to develop use case description. Yeah, a fully develop use case description for 2 use cases. So they already gave us 2 use cases, right? Add a seller and record a book order, right? So 2 use cases, adding a seller, recording a book order, right? So we need to be extremely careful what they mean by these 2 use cases. Also, we need to be really read carefully and see what they mean by these 2 use cases and what comes inside. And then and system sequence diagram, so SSD, for each of these 2 use cases, add seller and record book. Okay. So so use case diagram to so we can have one use case diagram to indicate the whole system, whatever the system that they are developing, that's what they're asking us. And then 2 use case descriptions, right? And then 2 system sequence diagrams to represent these 2 use case descriptions. So that's what they're asking us to do, right? So there's no activity diagram in this case. But activity diagram we need to develop, right? But they don't ask it. Okay. So 3 models basically they ask it to develop. Okay, let's read the case study. The icehaver.com book exchange. So looks like a kind of online book exchange. Yeah, now let's read it. The icehaver.com book exchange is a type of e-business exchange that does the business entirely on the internet. The company acts as a clearinghouse for buyers and sellers of the used books. All right, so it's a clearinghouse, online clearinghouse. So we have buyers, we have sellers, and something like that. Okay. To offer the books for the sale, a person must register, right, with icehaver.com. The person must provide a current physical address and telephone number, as well as the current email addresses, right? So these are the registration details required for a person who registered in. So the system then maintains an open account for this person. Okay, maintains an open account for this person. Okay, so looks like a one use case. Yeah, open an account, right? Or the registration of a person. Okay, and then access to the system as a seller is through a secure authenticated portal. Okay, right? So any person can be, it looks like to me like eBay, right? So I can have an account, right? And I can be a seller, or same time I can be a buyer as well, right? So that's what it sounds like to me in here, right? So let's jump to the second paragraph. The seller can list books on the system through a special internet form. The form asks for the pertinent information about the book, its category, its general condition, and the asking price. A seller may list as many books as desired, right? So there is no restriction. The system maintains an index of books in the system, so buyers can use the search engine to search for a book. Right? That looks like another use case, right? So search books. So if buyer wants to find some books, he should have a capability in the system to search books. The search engine allows searches by the title, author, category, and the keyword. Okay, so that's something that we can implement. The search books a use case. Right. Then the third paragraph: the people want to buy books comes to the site and search for the books they want. Yes, and then when they decide to buy, they must open an account with a credit card to pay for that book. All right, so that means a buyer need to open an account with a credit card. So they need to register with the credit card, right? The system maintains all this information on a secure servers. Okay, so it's a secure server, right? So when a purchase is made, the icehaver.com send an email notice to the seller of the book that was chosen, as well as payment information. Right, okay, so that sends information to the seller. It also marks the book as sold, right? The system maintains an open order until it receives a notice that the book has been shipped, right? So there is an open order system. We need to keep the open order saying that, okay, until there is a notice coming saying that the book has been shipped from so that we need to wait until it's shipped. Okay, so after the seller is, now why they have given this, probably not, maybe it's actually good for the not for the system sequence diagram, or maybe system sequence. Let's see, mostly for what do you call the state machine diagram. Remember the states, we need to capture the status condition of the objects. Yeah, so probably this is more helpful for that, right? Because we need to find out whether it has been shipped or not. Yeah, right. So after the seller receives a notice that the listed book has been sold, the seller must notify the buyer via email within 48 hours that the purchase is noted, right? Shipment of the order must be made within 24 hours after the seller sends the notification email, right? Okay. The seller sends a notification to the buyer and the ishaver.com when the shipment is made. Okay, the seller sends the notices to these two actors. So after receiving the notice of shipment, the ishaver.com maintains the order has order in a ship status. Okay. Now again, this is order in the ship status, so state machine diagram. So we don't need to worry about that. At the end of each month, a check is mailed to each seller, right, for the book orders that have remained in a ship status for 30 days, right? So, okay, so they are sending a check, right? Now that looks like another use case to me. I mean, from sending a check, right, or sending a payment to the seller. Actually, who is sending this? Not the seller, but the ICE haver, right? That a person who is operating this website, maybe a clerk or admin person, okay, somebody. And the 30-day waiting period exists to allow the buyer to notify the IceHaver.com if the shipment doesn't arrive for some reason, or if the book isn't in the same condition as advertised. Okay, so that means there's a 30-day waiting period for the buyers that they can actually, looks like they have a kind of system to return the items if that is not in the same condition, or maybe they can they will refund the money if it doesn't arrive for some reason. Okay, so something we need to actually keep an eye, because we need to have a use cases to deal with that as well. Yeah. If they want, buyers can enter the service code for the seller. The service code is an indication of how well is the seller is servicing the book purchase. So what do you mean by that? It's a rating, right? Rating kind of thing, right? So we can rate each seller, okay, very good, bad seller, or average seller, etc., etc. So looks like another use case to me, right? Because that capability has to be there, yeah. Some sellers are very active and use icehaver.com as a major outlet for selling books. Thus, a service code is an important indicator of the potential buyers. Okay, so it's just a merely information over there. Right, so they have given this what do you call this domain model class diagram, or the class diagram. It looks like a kind of an ER diagram, right? So let's go through this very quickly. What we have here. Right, so looks like a person, there is a person entity in the system, right? So first the people need to register. So it looks like it create a kind of a person ID, name, address, phone number, email address. So these are the details, and then I think it the system need to generate automatically person ID. So person be a seller, or same time they can be a buyer as well. So they have two instances, right? So we can have a seller account, we can have a buyer account, right? If it is a seller account, you can say we have the service ratings, opening balance, last payment days, last payment amount, etc., etc. And if it's the buyer's account, we have credit card information, last purchase date, last purchasing amount, and then there is a kind of a relationship between these two. So what do you mean by this is one person can have either 0 or 1 seller's account in the system, right? And the same time person can be either can have either 0 or 1 buyer's account, right? So any person can have 1 buyer's account, 1 seller's account, right? Some person may not be a seller, may not be a buyer, right? That is why we have these zeros. That's what we mean by that. Okay, it's little quite different to the ERDs we have learned in last semester, isn't it? In the object oriented, but it's the meaning is same actually. And then here, if you have the seller's account, we can actually have many physical book entities, or when physical book instances, because we are selling books, right? So we can have one seller can have one to many items, right? That is what we mean by that. You can see the books has an ISBN ID, so that may be the primary key. Yeah. So apart from the others, other info. And then if it is a buyer, buyers can have one or many orders in the system, right? If it is a buyer need to have at least one or many orders. That is what we mean by this star. So order, you can see orders have order IDs, right? And then other information, and then orders and physical books, right? So this is this looks like to me like remember in last semester we have done one order can have many order items, right? So looks like order item kind of entity, like, right? So one order can have many order items, right? So we have weak entity in the middle, which has all the items in a particular order, which reference to one physical or one book in the system, right? That's the information we're capturing here, right? So they have given these information. So what we can do now is to develop what you call use case description, not the use case description. So first thing they ask is use case diagram, right? Now, okay, so what I will do is I'm not going to use draw diagrams.net because it takes time. You know how to use the or the diagrams.net app. So I already told you. So I'll go straight away to my sketch diagram using paint program. So that's easier for me. Okay. Right, so let's take the paint program. Let's very quickly, let's draw. So this is my automation boundary. Oops, bear with me, my hand is not. Okay, so we can say, let's actually, so what is actually the name of this system? Here. Okay, so the IELTS have a com books. So let's say book exchange. So this system is book exchange system. So let's say let's give a name for this system, book exchange. Right. The first thing we need to do is we need to identify who are the actors involved in this case study. Now, if you so definitely there are two actors, right? So buyer is there, seller is there, and then some employee in this bookstore who need to control from the backside some kind of activities, right? Like processing payments, etc. So there are three actors in this particular system. So what we can do is first try to actually draw these actors here. So let me draw first stick figure. So this is my seller. Let's say this is my buyer, right? And this is the employee. Maybe I can put somewhere here. So this is some employee in the company who is interacting with the system. Okay, so let's name these actors seller, and here the buyer, and here let's say so what is the game company? It's Ice Havel, right? Ice. So let's say try this JVE, I think LT Havel. So let's say I'll tell the employee, right? So three actors. Now let's identify the use cases. So let's identify the seller's use case. So first they need to actually register with the system, right? So registering seller is a one use case, I believe. Yeah, so we can get a one use case like register the seller. Maybe I can write here. So that is register the seller, right? Register seller. So that is the first use case. So remember, we need to actually link it. So this is the use case invoked by the seller. um, and then once they register, what they can do here, if you read it correctly, they should be able to list the books. Yeah, list the books. So listing the books is probably another use case. Yeah, we need to have that capability in the system. So I'll just write it here. List book. Okay, so that's something. Um, uh, right. So, and what else we have? Okay. So listing the books, and then that's what it says in this case. So let's say what are the other seller related info. Yeah, so this is showing. Okay, so this listing the books. And then it says there is a kind of some kind of a communication has to go because seller need to inform by the email saying the shipment has been made, right? Yes, so shipment of the order must be made within 24 hours. The seller sends the notification to the buyer and icehelp.com when the shipment is made, right? So looks like another use case, another major use case. So if you read from here to here, probably you can see kind of three use cases, right? So first one is a registering seller, then the listing the book, and then notify the shipment made. So probably we can say that as well. Okay, so notify shipment made. So always remember to use one verb, one noun. Okay, so looks like that's another use case. So so seller is invoking that use case. So basically there are three use cases for the sale. Right. So then let's think about the buyer side. So definitely the buyer should be able to search. Now, actually, before that, buyer should be able to open an account, right? So let's say create an account, open an account use case. So open account use case. That's what it says in the case study. So I just, and then once it open, the buyer should be able to searching the books, right? Should be able to search the book. Okay, so let's put it here. Search books. Search books. Right, search books. So once they search book, they should be able to that's what it says, right? So when they search books, yeah, search books, actually they had to search book first, and then if they decided to buy it, then we add it to kind of a our what do you call this, online shopping cart, and then we can register it. Either way, right? We can either register first or then search book, right? So that's okay. So either one is okay. And then what we had to do is and then we need to purchase the book, right? Purchasing the book, because if they decided to purchase, they should be able to purchase the book. So let's actually have another use case for that purchase. Purchase books. So purchase books. Now you need to be a bit careful here. Now purchase books, right? Now can you see a kind of a relationship? Now if you have the purchase book use case, we can have extend or include relationship of these two as well, right? Because sometimes we should be able to, okay, when you put the shopping, now purchase book means the shopping cart, right? Shopping cart. Then when you go to shopping cart, then you press the button, you put all the details, and then you decide, okay, I want to search something else, and I need to put something, purchase something else. So that means we should have a kind of a capability to search books inside this purchase book, right? So that is the normal way, right? So maybe we can do what we can do is remember the how to add include relationship dash arrow pointing to the subroutine. No, this is a subroutine, right? Which include, we can call that subroutine from this use case, and then we can say we can then put here like this include, and then same goes here, because sometimes by rather opening a account, they can actually visit the site and then select the books, right? And then they can open the account before they buy in the product. So that means purchase books use case should have a capability for open account as well. So we can call that subroutine within this use case. So let's put like this. Yeah, this makes sense. Yeah. And then we can put, okay, this is also an include relationship. Okay, right. So that's it. And then if you read the case study, you can see this what do you call the purchasers. So purchasers able to return the books if that book has a problem, right? So we should have a kind of a use case to handle this thing, right? So we can have a use case for that. Maybe we can say, or entering or process problem purchases or something like that. Okay, so we can say, let's say enter problem with uh, purchase. So enter problem with purchase. Okay, so let's assume that's another use case invoked by the buyer, and then finally they should be able to rate the seller satisfaction rating, right? So probably we need to have a use case to handle that satisfaction rating. Yeah. So let's have a use case to handle that. Can say let's say enter satisfaction code. Right, enter satisfaction. Let's enter satisfaction code. Okay. Right, so that's another use case. So looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so 5 use cases for for the buyer. Right, so we identified buyers and sellers use cases, and then now it's time to identify the employees. So what they are doing is they basically now see the system when the buyer buy a product. What it says is somewhere here I can see we need to the system or the admin person need to actually notify the seller about the purchase, right? So I think there is something they say something like that, right? Notification sent to the seller, right? There is a, there is a potential buyer for that product, right? That has to handle actually using another use case, probably invoked by this employee, right? So maybe we can have a use case for that. So let me have a use case to handle that. We can say, okay, let's say notify seller. Let's say notify seller about purchase. Notify seller about purchase invoked by the employee of that. So don't link this one with seller, right? So sometimes you think, okay, no, because it's not invoked by the seller, invoked by the employee, right? So it's not related to the seller, okay? So you need to be a bit careful. And then, of course, if you read this case study, it says we need to process the payment because end of the 30 days or something. There's something says here. We need to pay we need to pay for the seller, right? Yeah, something like that it says here. So the payment process has to be handled by the employee as well. So we need to have a use case for that. Probably I may name it as say send payment. I think they are paying by the check. Yeah, send maybe you can say send check to seller. Send check to the seller. All right, so that looks like the complete use case diagram for this system. Okay, complete use case diagram for the system. Sorry, I didn't get Chingsen. Right, so Chingsen, sorry, I just saw your question. It says, can the book ID author name as include from search book? Now, book ID and author name, Chingsen, it's not a use case, right? It's a attribute of entity, right? So now here, what we are trying to tell is what are the relationship between use cases? Use cases are processes, right? Use cases are processes. So so we don't need to include these attributes here. Book ID, author name. It can be your book ID. We can use as a part of the search, but in this case we don't need to show that these things here. Okay, so yeah, so you don't need to worry about it. All right, so this is the answer for the first question. That's what they're asking us to do, right? So that's the answer. This is the answer. Okay. So let me actually try to capture this, and let me capture this and transfer it to Excel spreadsheet. So I have this in front of me. Okay, so imagine this is copy. So let me make another. This is yeah, so this is the answer for the first part. So I have this in front of me. So the second question is, now we need to develop a fully developed use case description for add seller and record book order. Okay, so add seller and record book order. Yeah, so add seller means this one. Yeah, so looks like this use case. So we need to have a use case description for this. and record sales. Yeah, so it looks like this use case. So they ask us to develop fully developed use case descriptions for these two use cases, right? So now it's time for us to do that. So let's come back to our Excel spreadsheet. So what I will do is I'll now this is the template, yeah. So let me take this template because it's easier for me and delete that information. Okay, so let me paste it here. Let me delete all this stuff. So let me delete this stuff. So just give me a sec. I'll just delete this. Delete this. Right. So now let me. Okay. All right. Right. So first use case. What is the first use case they ask? Add a seller. So add a seller means, yeah, register a seller, right? So add a seller, register seller is the same thing. Okay, now let's read. So let's fill these blanks. So scenario is register seller, right? So use case is register seller. That is the use case name. So the scenario is same, right? Scenario is same. Then what is a triggering event? Triggering event is a new seller wants to sell the books. A new seller wants to sell books. Yeah. So that's the triggering event. And then you can give a small brief use case description. I'm not going to include this. You can say, okay, seller decide to list the books, and seller registered to receive the confirmation email from the system. Okay. So let me actually quickly write this. Maybe you can say seller decides that he or she would like to let's say list books, book or books, right? Can be one book or many books, right? And then it says seller, can say seller registers and receives seller registers and receives confirmation email, right? Confirmation email, right? So the seller receives the confirmation email saying, okay, you have registered, something like that. So that is what we want, right? So confirmation email has to be sent from the system, right? So the actors involved in here is seller, right? The seller, and also the email server. I would say, okay, email server is sending a notification to the actor or to the seller, right? So not this system, maybe the email server. You can put an email server as another actor here, but let's handle it differently in this case because I don't want to. So let's put an email server as a different actor. Right, so stakeholders are probably the name of the company or the management. Just put the management here because, and then, so what are the preconditions that we need before we execute this? So the preconditions basically, if you go through here, you can see precondition is yeah, seller information has to be there before or the seller. Now let's say this is a registering, right? So registering means So we can say the precondition now, okay, seller should not exit the system before it get registered, right? That might be a one precondition, because if because that is obvious for any system, right? You can't exit the system before it get registered. Maybe you can put that as a precondition. And then a seller must have all the information required to register as a seller, right? Because it says there are certain information that the system required from the seller to get registered somewhere here. So we can say in general, you can say, right, okay, seller must not exit exit uh, in the system. Exists from no, we can say actually, so all right, sorry, so a seller has to be there, should not exist in the system, exist in the system, right? Exist in the system, because um that's much better actually. Yeah, we can say seller must not should must not in the system. So that means if the seller already in the system, he should not create another account, right? So that might be, and then we can say seller should not exit while registering. Registering. So we can have actually two. Maybe we can have another one. We can say, okay, seller must have all information to register as a seller. All right. So we can actually put all these information as well. Okay, let me merge it. Okay. Right. So these are the preconditions. Post condition. So once it gets registered, what is the post condition? Seller must exist, or seller has an account to list the books, right? Seller must have an account created to list the books, right? That's the post condition. Can say, okay, seller must or say, or we can say seller has an account to list books, and something like that. All right, so now we need to have a flow of activity. So flow of activities between the seller and the system, right? Seller and the system. So there are two swim lanes. One is seller, one is system. Or sorry, we can say not the seller, actor. So actor is the seller, and the system. System is this system, right? So now we need to identify how this action goes in. So let's say first one, seller first need to connect to this this website and fills out the registration form, right? That's the first thing we need to do, right? So let me put that first. Seller connects to the system, and say fills out registration form. Okay, so let me actually this little bit. Can I not grab it? Yeah. No. Yeah. Right, and then so let's actually go back to second step. Let's say the second step, because there is no response. because the website displays the form anyway. So then we fill the form, right? And then seller submit the form. Then of course there is an action from the system, yeah. So we can say seller submits registration form, right? And then of course the system takes an action. So 2.1, yeah, then the system actually send the notification, yeah, from through the email server, right? You have registered, okay? So we can say system notifies seller, means not seller through a confirmation, or maybe you can say seller via a confirmation email. Okay, something like that. And then and then confirmation email. Okay, so that's enough actually. And now we can say the exception conditions. Is there any exception conditions that we can think about? All right, so yeah, can you see here, because the seller has to be, should not exist in the system, right? So we can have one exception condition. For example, here, if the seller already exists in the system need to send prior login or password to email address or something like that, right? Because it's the account already exists, right? So we can have that kind of a thing as an exception condition here. So 1.1 here, so it related to 1. So the first exception condition is if the seller already exists in the system, the system should send prior login and password details to email address. Yeah, something like that. What else we can think about that? Okay, so here it's there. Okay, right. So how about because sometimes the sellers, now you know in the eBay, I don't know, you may have seen, if if the seller recorded as a bad seller, right? For example, his history is not so good selling the products. So we need to tell the seller, oh, you are not allowing to register, right? Something like that. So probably that might be another exception condition that can happen when he or she try to submit the form, right? Submit the form. So we can say that exception here. For example, we can say here there can be exception, like if the seller was removed from the system for a bad transaction or bad credit history, the system need to send the seller an email notifying the seller of the situation, and no account has been created because of that, right? So we need to write that some kind of an exception here so the developers can understand what's going on, right? So let's say like something like this. If let's say if the seller was removed from the system for bad say bad transaction or credit, right? Credit, the system sends the seller an email notifying, let's say notifying situation and inform that account is not created. Account is not created. Yep. So possibly oops. Yeah, so you can write something like that. That kind of exception condition. Exception condition for this one. Okay, so what has happened? Maybe I take out the. Maybe let me actually grab the text so it's clear. Right. Yeah. So right. So we have done the use case description for registering the seller. Right. So that's it. And then then the next step is they ask us to develop SSD. So let's develop the SSD to represent this one, and then we'll come back if we have the time to do the next the other use case. Right. So let's go to the SSD. So actually, I will develop the SSD here because it saves me the time. So I just have don't save. Okay. So let me write the SSD. So bear with me, my diagrams are not so good. So this is the seller. So let's first write let's identify. So I just put this is the swim, not the swim lane. What do you call this? I forgot the name. Sorry, just bear with me. So then this one is the system. The system we are developing. So we can say dot system underline. Right. So this is the system. And then this is the lifeline. Yeah. So this is the object lifeline. This is the user lifeline for the use case. So something like this. Right. Now let's identify what actions. So basically, so what it says is seller enters the seller information, and the seller information comes back to the seller, right? So we can say we can have that here. We can say enter seller details. Maybe you can say information. So I just put the information here. Maybe you can what you can do is you can list what are the information. I think the case study has given a name, address, phone number, etc., etc. So you can actually list it here. So I'm not listing it, but just read the case study and list it. Okay. And then it displays the information, or maybe it displays a kind of a email saying, okay, these are the details. So let's have a dash arrow from the system to the seller or the actor, indicating okay, seller details. Okay, and then confirmation email has to be sent by the system to the seller, right? System to the seller. Then we can say seller details displaying, or maybe we can say, okay, in the same message, you can say seller details um, plus uh, con confirmation email confirmation, or plus confirmation. Now, sometimes some people in some textbooks, they may actually now you can actually, like, maybe you can actually take this confirmation now. Some can argue, okay, because we don't have the email server, we are not going to, because email server is, the system notify the email server the confirmation details, and then the email server is sending back the confirmation email to the seller. In that case, if that is the case, what we can do is we can get rid of this confirmation details. Um, we can have another actor maybe inside here, right? We can develop another actor. We can say this is the email server, and then the confirmation email, confirmation details, actually, or confirmation details goes from the system to the email server, and then the email server sends the confirmation email to the actor. So we can say here confirmation details. Oh, sorry, confirmation email actually. This confirmation email actually sent by the system to the server, and the server sends that email to the seller. So we don't need to show that here, right? Because there is no this is our system, and we are showing our system and the communication. So this communication goes to the email server, and we are not going to link it from the seller, because we need to develop another system sequence diagram to show that interaction, right? Not in this one. Okay. So sorry, Michaela, you have sent said, I mean, messages. So we have to do the activity diagram always before the use case. It depends, Michaela, because sometimes in some use cases, some complicated use cases, yes, activity diagram we first, because we want to model. Now, what is the activity diagram actually tells? Sorry, activity diagram, not activity. This is not. So, what is the activity diagram actually shows here is the interaction. This one, right? So we can actually clarify it more further if you develop the activity diagram first, rather than writing this, and then develop it, and then we can easily write these activities between interaction between the system and the graph. Yes, yeah. So mostly we do like that, but sometimes when I work in the industry, actually I used to do this first sometimes, and then develop the activity diagram. But it depends on the situation. Yeah. It depends on the situation. Yeah. So the complicated one, I actually prefer to develop the activity diagram first, because it makes sense. But sometimes when I develop this one, activity description, I may need to come back and change it, because it not looks, it's go either way, right? You need to come back and change the models always, because it not looks logical sometimes. Okay. Yeah. So these sort of decisions has to be done. Okay. Right, so that's the SSD diagram, probably for this use case. So let me capture that and record it here. Delete, copy. Right, I can put it here somewhere. Yep, this is this. Yeah, so now we have three models, right? Use case diagram, use case description, a use case diagram for the whole system, right? And then we develop a use case description for one of these use cases, and then we develop system sequence diagram to represent uh, this. And then of course if you want you can develop the activity diagram as well, but here I am not. Right, so that is about use case this thing. And then the second, I think I will give you a chance to develop the second one. Okay, the record book old use case, uh, the record book use case description. So what you can do is you can follow the same method. So what they ask is here, this one, this use case, yeah. Um, is it record book, record a book? So record a book order, yeah. Record a book order means the purchasing books, yeah. This one. So try to develop this one, and yeah. So I'll give you a chance to think about that one. Okay. So what you need to do is read the case study and then develop this use case description and then the SSD diagram, right? Now remember the SSD diagram when you develop for the buyer side, probably you need to have a loops, right? Because the seller should be able to add the products or the books in this case to the shopping cart, right? So we need to have a kind of a loop for that, right? Loop like what we developed earlier. Where is that? Here, like this, right? So in that loop, you can actually have many interactions in that loop, because we can search books, right? And the book information displays back to the actor, right? And then that is adding that book to the shopping cart, and then we get the confirmation saying the item has been added to the shopping cart. So it has to go through a loop, right? So that's something that you need to think about, right? So it's practical thing, right? So when you, this is a usual shopping cart kind of thing, and then once they have done that, then the checkout, right? So checkout process, so checkout function has to be activated by the buyer on the system. Okay, um, and then we can have another one like this kind of box to show. Now remember, we can actually show if you go through the last week, so week 9, can't remember whether you can remember that week 9 diagrams. So this is the loop, and then we can actually show some other information like if else, optional, right? Now remember here the optional, so we can show the optional, we can have optional box as well in the buyer side, because if the account is if the account is not exist, we need to create the account, right? So that is optional frame that we can develop there. Okay, so that is something something that you need to think about. Maybe we can, what I can do is I will develop SCSD. I'm not going to develop a use case description because it takes a lot of time. I'll develop system sequence diagram for the buyer's side. Okay, for the buyers for this particular use case, purchasing or record the book order. So this one, so let me develop that very quickly to show that. So let me have that stick figure. All right, so this is my this is the buyer, and then this is the system. Okay, let me name this very quickly. buyer, and it's a system, and it's a lifeline. This is the lifeline for the system, right? So we can have a straight away that the frame, right? Search frame or the loop frame first, because buyers search the items and add the items to the to the shopping cart. So I can have that box straight away, something like this. We can say here loop, or we can say for each item. For each item, we can say, okay, for each item, the buyer finds the book. Find book. So in order to find the book in the search, we have to type the title, or author, or maybe ISBN, yeah, ISBN number, right? So these are the things we need to enter in the search, right? So, and then list of matches. Actually, sorry, I forgot. This has to be. This is not a. Not this is a solid line. Okay, sorry. And then we are getting the information back from the system to the seller. So this is dash line, indicating the matching search criteria, right? So list of matched books displays back to the buyer, and then the buyer can select books and add it into the cart, right? Shopping cart. So I can have another solid line from here to system saying, yep, add to the shopping cart. Add to, let's say, add to the cart. So I'm adding, let's say, ISBN, right? That's what the system is selecting, ISBN number. And then confirmation has to come back to the buyer saying, okay, the item has added to the shopping cart. Yeah. So dash, again, dash line. Yep. Confirmation. Make sense? Make sense this one, guys? Okay. You guys okay with this? Yeah, for the buyer side. Yep. So we start straight away from the loop. So you can write like this for each item, or do for or do while or something like that, so to indicate that's a loop. Okay. And then what happen is we can have the checkout, right? So if this is successful, the buyer say, okay, I want to checking out, right? That's what it looks like in the case study. So I can have solid line goes from here. That's the checkout. So I just press checkout button, right? So I can say check out. It's just normal function. I'd say activation of normal function. So that's just, I'm not passing any mention. And it's the checkout, and then we can say, okay, if I have an account, I displays the account information, right? Isn't it? If I have an account, because I can first search the book and add it to the shopping cart, and then once the checkout is activated, it displays the information if the account is exist, right? If the account is not exist, then we need to have another process to have that account created in the system. Yeah. So let me uh, this record that information. Okay, so we are getting information from the system. What do you call this? Let's say display account uh, details. Display account details only if the account is there, right? So we can actually put a condition here in using square bracket if account exists. If account exists, right? Okay, right. So yeah, that's it. And then we can or otherwise, if account is not exist, once we activate this, we need to have another, not the loop in this time, is optional frame. Remember the optional frame I have told you, right? Like this optional, right? If now here it says if accessory is selected from the customer, we need to operate this process, right? That is what we mean by opt. So the same principle applies here. So I can have a opt frame. So I just put opt, saying okay, this is optional. Displays the account setup details to the customer, right? Displays the account. Okay, I can say details, right? Account setup details, and then and then uh, and then the customer enters the information to the system, right? So, and then the information goes back. Uh, Enter account details. So here we are just inputting the name, maybe the billing address, credit card details, etc., etc. I just put some dots, sometimes some other information as well. So enter the account details, right? And then once we, and then my process, and then send me a kind of account confirmation details. It displays in maybe in the sorry, this is dash line, sorry. Always responses are dash lines. Okay, I can say okay, account maybe you can say new account, the new account confirmation, right? New account confirmation, right? So and then so we have a message. Sorry, somebody has sent a message. Yeah. Okay. And then we can actually confirm the purchase, right? So we can say um, right. So we have add the products to the basket, and we now in the checkout activity, right? We press the checkout. So now we need to confirm the purchase, right? So and we can actually can have that confirm purchase, because once we check out, we need to confirm the purchase by maybe we can put our credit card detail, we can update the credit card details, etc., etc., right? So let me have another process, another confirm, let's say. So we need to activate that, right? So seller need or buyer need to activate confirmation. And then like what I did earlier, the confirmation email, the system sends the confirmation email to the server, and then the server sends that confirmation email back to the buyer. So we can have email server here. Email server, sorry. Email server. And I can say, all right, so the system sends the confirmation email to the email server. I can say, let's say to email server. So what they are sending to the email server, sorry, to email server. What they are sending to the email server. In this case, I am just writing like a function. Purchase details. Yeah, purchase details. That's the confirmation, right? Okay, so that's, yeah. So that's about the purchaser side use case system sequence diagram, right? So what do you mean by that? Yeah, so this is the recording the book order use case SSD. I haven't done the fully developed use case description. Maybe you can actually think about what it looks like, the fully developed use case description by going through this. Okay, this makes sense, guys? Does it make sense? Now this one is a little tricky, right, compared to the seller side, because there are things that we can, include. Yeah. Any questions so far? No? Are you all okay with that? Yes, better now. Yeah, Chengsen is okay. How about Michaela, Pressure, Huang, Spencer, Darcy? Can you let me know a little bit? Does it make sense? My explanation? Is it how you do? Yeah. So you can apply the same concept, but you don't need to actually develop system sequence. Did I ask? No. But system sequence diagram concept is important when you try to develop interface dialogues, right? So we are doing it in the next week, right? Using interface dialogue for your selected use case. Now that this concept is important, okay? Concept, SSD concept, right? So just keep that in mind. Yeah. Sometimes a little bit anxious, yeah. Yes, doing it alone. Now it makes sense. Now you can apply the same concept to your. Now you can realize, you can see that there is a kind of a link between the programming kind of stuff and how this subject is quite related to real world system development activities, isn't it? Now it makes sense, right? Very early weeks you will feel like very boring kind of thing, but now you feel like what is the connection between the programming side and the system development, why we need these models. Yeah, so that is my main objective, because I don't want this subject in the early stages looks very boring, but now it's really interesting, because this is really system development. This is how we develop the system, clarifying the model, because now it's very easy for developers to implement this in a selected language, right?